So Seamus has written a book on the famine, and Seamus's great-grandmother was one of the last survivors of the famine, and she passed away in the 1950s, was it, Seamus?
1956, yeah.
Yeah. So Seamus there will start off there, and if you have any questions then at the end or want to discuss anything, that's okay with you, isn't it, Seamus?
That's brilliant, yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
so thanks very much.
Just while Peter is saying that, it's just the first thing to say is, and Peter, while you're there, to say thanks very much to yourself and Ben for the idea and for hosting this and making your place available.
Not at all. And thanks very much for coming, Seamus.
No bother, no bother. So, yeah, as Peter said, I wrote a historical fiction novel based on the local area called The Heart of the West, and it's historical fiction, but it's probably over 90% true. But some of you, and I say, but you, I know I've probably read it anyways. But I now, not that I'm trying to promote the book tonight, but I do have some out of the band. That's a good start. As Ben Dunn says, pile them high and sell them cheap. But anyways, I'm not actually, while it will be referenced a bit, I'm not actually here to talk about the book specifically or promote it. In discussion like with Peter when he asked me about coming, and so we decided on a theme or two for it. And the other thing about it, it's not a lecture, and think of it as a chat here between ourselves, right? So if somebody wants to, especially if it reminds you of something, maybe you say a story you heard that you wonder, is that true about the famine or whatever? Well, keep it in your pocket until towards the end, and we'll have it. We can bring it up, and we'll get a bit of discussion going on that. So as you can see, there's no slides and no videos because history was passed on by word of mouth long before the PowerPoint and the video, and so we'll keep it that way tonight. And so basically the theme I'm thinking around is looking at the exploration of what might have been a comforting idea that a place like this here, with the sea and the shore and the land, that it could have sustained people even with the failure of the potatoes, and why do people still starve with that? So that's part of what we will look at. The other thing that we look at as well is the history, myth versus fiction, folklore versus fact, and it's tied in with all that as well. So, like history and memory, I mean, they don't always agree, and memory is a very tricky thing, people remember, two people in the family remember something totally different, and so it's the same with history. And the story, of course, keeps growing, but the facts will always be the same. And just talking about one of the reasons why there might be a bit of mythology around all of these issues was, not awful far from here, back in Carramore, there lived a man called James Berry. So I'm sure lots of you heard of him. And he wrote a well-known book, you can still get on the internet, called Tales of the West. Now, some of the stories were true, and some were just stories. But even the ones that were told were true, were embellished, And so a lot of people, and I know myself, like even from things my mother told me, that actually she was actually telling it from James Berry, not from an authentic history book. So that's James Berry. He originally put stories in the local paper, and then with the help of the paper, he published them in a collection called Tales of the West. I'm sure it's a lot of you've heard of it. It's if you get hold of it, it's a good old. It's in a lot of houses around. But so an example of that would be like the Doolock, and a lot of you probably heard the Doolock tragedy. And I know there's some people here that might just briefly to say about during the famine. Some people particularly I come from the Harp, what's called the Harp parish of Louisburgh, and so they came to Louisburgh, and people from around Louisburgh, they came to get relief, from the relieving officer, but they were told that the relieving officer had gone on to Delphi House, where they were whining and dining, so they headed off for there, but when they got there was no relief, they got nothing, and on the way back, it was an awful weather and night, and people died along the way and all that. Now, I believe growing up, but it was part of the James Berry thing, that like a couple of hundred people died. But actually, the best estimate that the people that directly died, and it was reported the following week in the Mayo Constitution. Now, okay, bear in mind the Mayo Constitution was the English supporting Protestant paper, whereas the Mayo News read the more and the Connaught, but they more the Catholic side paper. But that's not the here or there. They reported 7 people died along the way. Now others did die afterwards because they were weakened from hunger and they didn't recover from the hypothermia and the effects of the journey. So, and then records are poor about deaths at the time as well too. And I think some the British establishment, the census from that time, they destroyed all the census records from that time because they were so shameful, to them. I don't know if you know that or not. But so, but then, that's kind of tragic. Oh, by the way, I should say, I'm not actually going to make this awful heavy. I'm not, it's not going to be an awful heavy thing. Like the famine, there's nothing light about the famine, but I'm not going to make it awful heavy. But and on that note, this Peter gone out back in again, or she gone out there. But when I was talking to Peter before, he was telling me about talking about the myths about landscape. I'm talking about myths and fact and fiction that I grew up with was that Dulac Lake was as deep as the mountain is high. Yeah. How many people heard that? Yeah. But actually, we're talking about this Peter, and Peter says, well, he did a bit of diving, and they actually did depths on it at different points, and they found nowhere was deeper than 12 meters. Now, I actually, just out of curiosity, looked it up afterwards, and it's actually, the official record was 46 meters at the deepest point, but nothing like the height of the mountain. The myth probably grew because the lake is so dark. And for people without Irish language, Dulac means the Black Lake. In our dialect, black is called Dove. And anyone that's from Leinster or Munster, they might say Dove. Even though in Galway the pub is called Roisin, I don't call it Roisin Dove, but I call it Roisin Dove. But anyways, we say Dove for black. You'll hear local people my age, they fall Dove. It's fall do, and they'll say fall. They'll actually call it fall do. Even speaking in English, they'll say, "Oh, growing up, we always call it fall do," and that's because the do for. But anyway, that's not. But that's like so with myth. Now I have to say at this stage, and pin my flag to the mast and say that I give equal priority to folk tales and mythology and history. They both have a big place and their own important contribution for us all, So it's not that I'm saying ignore folklore and history good or bad. I was talking to a young man earlier on that he's there, and I hope you don't mind me, but he's studying history, fair play. He's studying history down in Limerick in UL, so he'll know about researching the facts and all that. So so James Berry basically, he was more like how the people felt and experienced things rather than the actual facts is what he concerned himself with. Now, I said it like it wasn't awful heavy, but going to be very heavy. But there's a piece here that I'd come on when I was researching my own book, and a woman called I've never heard the name before, but Asenath Nicholson. She came from America to travel around and see the effects of the famine and so on. And so she wrote a collection, a book about it, Lights and Shades of Ireland, 1850. But because she actually mentions Old Head, she stayed in Old Head. And also before we go on, it also gives for people not so familiar, it'll give an insight into just how bad things were. So here's the little piece from her. Excuse me, a bit of a peak on there now. The little town of Louisburgh, 2 miles from Old Head, has suffered extremely. An active priest and faithful Protestant curate were doing to their utmost to mitigate their suffering, which was like throwing dust in the wind. Lost forever. The work of death goes on, and what is repaired today is broken tomorrow. Many have fallen under their labours. The graves of the Protestant curate and his wife were of the Protestant curate and his wife were pointed out to me in the churchyard, who had fallen since the famine in the excess of their labour. And the present curate and his praiseworthy wife, unless they have supernatural strength, cannot long keep up the deadly struggle. The road into the Killery Mountains was rough, and we constantly were meeting pale, meagre-looking men who were on their way from the mountains to break stones and pile them mountain high for the paltry compensation of £1 of meal a day. These men had put all their seed into the ground, and if they gave up their cabins, they must leave the crop for the landlord to reap, while they must be in the poorhouse or the open air. This appeared to be the last bitter drug in Ireland's cup of woe. Why, a poor man was asked when we met dragging seaweed to his potato field, why do you do this when you tell us you expect to go to the poorhouse and leave your crop to another? I will put it on, hoping that God Almighty will send me the work to get a bit. We met flocks of wretched children going to school for the bit of bread, some crying with hunger, and some begging it to get in without the penny which was required for tuition. The poor, emaciated creatures went weeping away. One saying he had been looking for a penny all day yesterday and could not get it. The doctor who accompanied us returned to report to the priest the cruelty of the teacher and the relieving officer. But this neither frightened nor softened their hearts. These people are shut in by mountains and the sea on one side, and roads passable only on foot on the other, having no bridges, and the paths entirely lost in some places among the stones. Though we met multitudes in the last stages of suffering, yet not one through that day asked for charity. And in one case, the common hospitality showed itself by offering us milk when we asked for water. This day I saw enough, and my heart was sick, as I say, from Aslet Littleson, Lights and Shades of Ireland, 1850. So, you can see there, that was the background of what the people were suffering and how bad it was, you know. And as in my own book, then that's when the colony in back in Killeen was formed. And I don't know if any of you have visited like there, or the Clapper Bridge. You know, a lot of people actually know the Clapper Bridge, but they don't actually know the rest of the history of what's all around it, like about the colony and all that. And there is the colony, still the colony farm there, which is made up of the land of the colony. And there are relations here of the people that are there today. But that road, the house where I was born and reared, is right at the junction with the main road and the Colony Road, where the Colony Road branches off. And it's still called the Colony Road. And just on the other side, there's a road called Bórí na Díocha. Bórí na Díocha means the Road of Arms. And it was called that because of the famine relief road, like a lot of these roads. It's a handy road now. I know they said they were going nowhere and all that, but it's a handy little road. It's a handy little road. But it was built as famine relief, and we still call it Bórí na Díocha to this day. And I tried to actually to kind of get the essence of that road and its place in the history in a little poem, which is it's actually before the start of my book as well. Bor Inagiacha, as is the road of arms. We will stroll a while, you and I, down a long forgotten famine road, back the way, the path our people came. Bor Inagiacha, road of arms, each side held in by solid stone. A skin of moss and lichen cannot hide a stone's scale. Large or small, round and square, these hard stones like skulls and bones, each one a sacred story. In a place neither now nor then, not so long ago, when stones could talk, O Shanachie, let your story flow, which is where we're going. So, that's Bor Inagiacha, and they still to this day, the colony, the Bor Inagiacha, and the names of road places, they tell the stories as well, you know, of the famine in the land. It's in the landscape, it's written on the maps. Now, the first, it mentioned on the flyer about, like I said, the theme was why didn't we live a fish and all that, and it was mentioned on the flyer about fishing specifically. But we'll start at the sea and go to the foreshore and then onto the land. So now, with the fishing, I probably have an insight into this myself, because I grew up, we were curragh fishing, and we had a curragh, and myself and my father fished from that curragh. And as I was saying to a man earlier, like that, there's a chapter in about a boy fishing with his father, but it was actually myself, really. Mm-hmm. So we fished with hand lines, and like there was no, well, at that time there was a slipway that were near where we had put up the boat. But if you go back to the famine times, there was no even with slipway. By slipway, I mean, you know what I mean, like a little slip for boats. So, and no, definitely no harbours. But so you would have to launch from the shore, and a lot of it is surf kind of beach. And I remember once myself, my father, and an older neighbour. We were fishing, and we were coming back, and the waves had gone up a little bit. Let's just say if it was today, there probably would have been a few people surfing, and we had at that time. Now back where the slipway was, it was a place called Barnawan. Barnawan actually means the white gap. But anyways, so if you had to come in on the beach, it could be a bit dodgy. And I remember on one occasion the waves, and we were kind of swamped a bit, and we lost some of the fish, and look, we didn't lose ourselves. And so you could see that. Then also you had to carry the boat. Do you know those iconic pictures you see, like of the a beetle, a big beetle, 3 people under a curragh carrying it, you know. So that's the way we carry the boat as well. And but so like in famine times, well, first of all, there were very few curraghs of boats, and if there was, there were in the early stages, even people with big boats, they sold all the stuff on the boats, all the gear. I read accounts of like in the Claddagh in Galway, which was a well-known fishing place. And by the way, Claddagh actually, which is what I'm going to be talking about in a minute, Claddagh means the shore. You know, the black, you know, the black part of the shore. The Traw is the beach, and the Claddagh is the black, the stones black. So, the foreshore as well. But anyways, I read accounts of how the boats, these are bigger boats, not curraghs, are tied up at Galway, at the Claddagh. And it's the way it put it was, it says, they were stripped as naked as the day that they left the shipyard. I suppose, like when the famine started, they said they thought it'd just be for a year, so they sold a lot of gear. And then the next year they had nothing. So the boats were paying, they still couldn't fish and so on. But there would have been many curraghs around anyways, but if there was, then they couldn't even probably afford tackle. So then as well as that, like, and I know this from my own experience, you know, that it's the number of days you can go fishing in a curragh, they're a bit limited. It's obviously seasonal if you're looking from late spring until late summer, maybe early into autumn on a good year. And so that's a limitation as well. And I even remember, like, even in good weather, like I might say to my father, "Will we go fishing?" because I want to get away from the bog, you know. And he'd say, he'd look out, we weren't far from the sea, and he'd say, no, there's a bit of a swell. So it didn't take much of a swell to stop currachs going out, you know. And so these would have been things, even if they had a boat, that would have been limitations as well. Mind you, there was other days he said, do you know what, we'll go fishing, because they'll get away from the midges. Great way to get away from the midges, go fishing in the sea. But the sea is hard work. It's not like Super Value where you go into the fish counter and just, you know, get what you want or whatever like that. So just checking here, anything else that oh yeah, there was it didn't apply as much to the sea as the shore, but of course the landlord controlled everything too, like, you know, and he could, if you wanted to stop you getting access to the beach even, like, you know, but it was more the shore that he was interested in and that, but that could have been a factor as well too. So getting on from the sea then. Do you know what? I will actually know that now that we're on the sea. Does anyone want to, on that area, you know, the sea and the fishing, before we go, does anyone want to throw out a question or make a comment? Come on, James.
I think it was the Cromwellian settlement, but one of the things that happened was, I think it was a mile in on the whole shore, all the way around Ireland, was reserved for the settlement, for the English. So the Irish didn't have access to the shore.
That's right.
Since
that is true. Yeah. And it applied more to the sea without that. But it's true. They could at a whim they could stop you even if you had a boat bringing it down, like, you know. That is true.
What kind of fish were they after? Me.
Sorry.
What kind of fish were they after?
Pollock would have been like today. Pollock would have been one that, as we call them, something. They're slightly different. Cold fish, you know. You know, they're very like pollock. There's only a slight difference in the line. There was actually at that time a big run on herrings, and they were about to build. They used to come into Kilry and all, and they were about to build facilities and improve the road and everything for exporting herrings, and they were putting in this infrastructure and everything to get boats. But then the herrings disappeared, and you know we never really had them much since. But and that wasn't talk about global warming and I know it just disappeared. Nobody really knows. They stopped coming. But they would.
So we think of fish, we always go to the sea, but Ireland has got its lakes and its rivers, and Mayo is literally islands in amongst all this. Why wasn't there any sort of connection to that?
I know, because I should admit I'm delighted you said that, because I was talking about the sea there, like, but in fish generally, that's where the landlord control really came in. They definitely would not let you take fish from the lakes or the rivers. Now people did. I mean, same as nowadays, people did poaching. Never did. And what do you call it? But yeah, exactly, and that's a good point. But so they would definitely have and they wanted to keep the lakes for the gentry, you know, for fishing, and the gillies would bring them out, and and that. So it's a very good point. So they were even the lakes and the rivers were even more controlled. Even though there was loads of fish, they were teeming with fish at the time, you know. But like the ordinary people, they wouldn't have fished. They'd have to fish them by foul means, because they wouldn't have any fishing rods or anything like that either. So like they would have to, you know, and they did of course get the odd salmon. But yeah, that is a good point. So any other they're good. Anyone else want just before we
Just on the heron. There was a cold spell just before the famine that drove away a lot of the fish that we were hoping to, like what you were saying,
yeah,
factory and everything. But there was a cold spell in the lead up to the famine that potentially had a factor in it, but
that's right.
It would have had probably a big factor in the heron. You know,
and I that's something I hadn't. To be honest, that's something I hadn't linked with it now. And but what I can definitely say on what you're saying, that to make things talk about the perfect storm, but the during this famine years around, there was a few really bad winters. so bad like that. Even without the blight in the famine, the potato crops would have been poor. People would hardly have been able to get turf. So it actually, and it's not something that's mentioned that often, but actually the weather was horrendous around that time. And of course then with poor housing and it made them colder and they needed more carbs, but they couldn't get them, and they, so it actually just relating to the point you're saying, and so it's very likely it was something to do with the but
yeah, because I think there's records coming in off Killybegs that the amount of cod that was being caught offshore, and just in the 5 years leading up there was a steady drop, huge drop then in the 2 years before it.
Right.
And it was to do with the water temperatures.
Yeah, you have my curiosity. I must look into that a bit more now. I'm curious about that actually. Now that you mention it, but yeah, they did. Strangely, and I mean, there was so much mackerel, so much shoals of herring coming in before that. So okay, well, you want to say something, young man? Good man.
Would places like Ackle Island and Clare Island have been better because like they're islands and like they not have just like walked outside and caught fishing?
And they what?
Like Ackle Island and Clare Island are surrounded by water.
Yeah.
So would they have like not been better at catching fish like because they're islands?
They would have had more. You're right. They would have had more, but not a lot. But they would have had more boats. Yeah.
A huge population too.
That's right.
1,700 people living.
There was an amazing population, and Clare Island had a usual farming system that time. They had the what do they call it?
Rundale.
The Rundale system. Where it was all kind of. It wasn't quite commonish, but it was all open, and everybody found their patch within this big open. It was, it wasn't very efficient, like as it turned out in the end, but Clare Island was all Rundale at the time, but they might have had a couple more, but again, some of them would have sold the tackle and that, to get food. So, okay, thanks for that. Well, moving on to the shore, and would you say that'd be a likely place because there's there's a lot of with edible seaweed and shellfish and so on like that. But when you really analyse, I mean, I know the coastline pretty good from all the way, say, from Newport and beyond over to the Silver Strand, as I'm sure a lot more of you do here. And think about it, like how many spots there, unless you're into seaweed and stuff like that, like me, you probably don't even think about it. Oh, sorry, by the way, that's just a woman. Is it working okay for you? Where's the one if we should wear her hearing aids?
Okay. Is it working?
Is it working for you? Yeah. That's grand. Sorry, no, she just for her hearing aids. Sorry, she was like that. Yeah. So sorry, but if you think about it, how many areas along there actually have spots? Something I'm sure you're interested in, Richard. How many spots would actually have edible seaweed and shellfish along there? I thought about it in preparing for this here, and like this fella, if you birch straw, they call it now, birch straw. That means 2 strands, which it has. I know that's so birch straw. I remember actually not too long myself, my daughter going there, and we got a great lunch out of it, like with different seaweeds and seagrass and shellfish and stuff like that. That's one spot there, all right. But there was one spot back beside where I come from, and it's obviously it has rocks for if you're going to get something like that, and it's kind of between 2 strands. And that's what it was. I call it like a notch flourish, a place of plenty, because it had Slough. I'll talk about that more in a minute. It had Dillisk, Cranach, Carrigeen, Dooligeen, mussels, and Wheeloaks, and barnyucks. All these different seaweeds and shellfish. Now, as you can see there, I like growing up. I didn't really know the English for any of these seaweeds or shellfish, but I know some of them now. But when I was in Wales in my camper van there a while back on an old tour. I saw in a shop window laver bread. Many people here have heard of laver bread. I'm from Wales here. So, anyways, laver bread is made. It's made with it's nearly a bit like our potato cakes, but there's no potato in it. But the way it's eaten with bacon or whatever like that. But there's a the seaweed that we could slough in the laver bread. And when I saw this, I knew because we actually were the last of the slough pickers, and we exported it to Wales for laver bread. Now back then I actually thought Laver was like Laver Brothers. I thought that was the name of the company. But I only realised in later years that Laver was the English name for slough. And if anyone that hasn't is trying to get their tongue around it, it's spelled Slebhajc. So try working that one out. But anyway, so we gathered the slough up until the early 1970s and sent it to Wales. And it brought back memories of that. And also the place where we did gather it, like it was one of the few places, like I was saying, that had all the ones I listed out. Now that spot there, it was probably no more than a good throw of a sea stone in length. But if you threw that stone and you went and you picked it up again, back in the famine times, and you picked it up again and threw it again, there's a chance you could have hit my great-grandmother's front door. She lived so close. And it's interesting to note that she lived to be 108 in famine times. And was it a connection or not? I don't know. Probably good luck with genes as well, you know. But there's no doubt. Now, okay, so that's the good side of it. But then coming to our question about, well, why didn't it help and save people? At the end of the day, it's not a lot of stuff. Like I said, it's a small area. A small village would clear it out in a couple of hours, you know. And that's what happened. Like that, if people, you know, they would it'd be cleared out. And on top of that, you have to really cut it. Even the people that gather the rack now, I was talking to a man the other day he gathers, cuts rack, as they say, and they leave about 6 inches of it to grow for the next year, you know. But in the family, they would have plucked everything bare on the seashore. And so in fact, the next year it was worse. Same with the shellfish. You know, there was because it didn't grow, or the shellfish didn't breed, or whatever, because they were all taken. So that was another problem. That nature was kind enough, bit tight, mind you, all right, but at the same time she couldn't feed the multitudes, you know, just from that. And another thing to see about all this, we know a lot more about nutrition now than then. And if you think all them things I'm talking about, there wasn't the people now that's going to gyms and everything are well up on carbs and proteins and all that kind of thing. But there wasn't much. I should say, like I worked me over 50 years now in healthcare myself, so I'm kind of interested in, well, like, you know, nutrition and stuff like that, and plants and more than disease, which I'll talk to about afterwards, because that fascinates me a bit as well. But so basically, a lot of the things I'm talking about, the seaweeds and the shellfish and all that, there was very few carbs in it, you know, like, and so it didn't give you that much energy either. But apart from that, I say, then the other thing about it was, of course, as James mentioned there, that the landlord controlled the shore, and people didn't have access to it, and they would have been much more stringent about the foreshore because there could be commercial value than they would have been about the sea itself. And in fact, in later years, much later down after independence and in the 50s, 60s, I don't know if anyone has familiar with that, like families used to have stripes, we'd call it. You know, there were patches for people would have, but they picked the seaweed, different families. You know about that, Liam? Matt?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they'd have their patches, and dare you encroach on someone else's? And there was the other story of someone go down at night taking seaweed from someone else's patch and all that. I even remember, even in my younger days, I even remember a man being split open with a pitchfork over encroachment and that. But what do you call it? So even back then, there would have been an element of that as well, like where it would have, there would have been kind of family patches and all that. But basically, it wasn't going to be enough to do it. So anyways, summarising, them are the factors there. You also had to have the knowledge, about the shore and and all. Like when I was just thinking when I was saying that to myself, thinking about that. I was thinking about I was down here at Hull's Head a couple of summers ago one evening, and I was going fishing, and a man kept talking to me, and he says, the tide is right in on the beach, and I says, yeah, this high tide now, and he told me after he was actually from Longford, so that might explain an inland. But he says, and does it do that every day? And I said, if you hang about, it does it twice a day. But so like I'm talking, not being slagging the Longford people, but it's the point like that you need the knowledge as well too. What is edible and what isn't edible, and when you can now. In latter years, they would have, you wouldn't eat them in a month or an hour and stuff like that, so, but that, they wouldn't have bothered, that was another, like that's because that's partly due to breeding as well too, and they do change their taste, but they wouldn't, that wouldn't have bothered them during the famine, naturally enough. So these are the factors that would have prevented the seashore making a big impact. So, it wasn't the worst, but I'm going I did the fishing and it worked out well there. So I'm going to do the same again now, and I'm going to throw it out there. If anyone has any comments or questions or anything relating to the foreshore and seaweed or shellfish or anything like that, Lanarei.
Well, we used to pick winkles down in Louisburgh when we were young. It was pocket money.
It was exactly.
It wouldn't feed the village.
No. I mean, yeah.
It's just an occupation for youth.
That's right. That's why we did it. And anyone here pick and eat winkles? Yeah. And there's not a lot in them. I mean, in Ackland, they used to at festival they used to have competition where they winkles for taking out the winkle from the shell,
Well, these are exported out to France.
Sorry?
These are exported out to France.
They go mad. Yeah. That's right.
There's still plenty of young lads around. Plenty of young lads around the county doing that. Take a while to pick a bag.
Yeah.
A long time.
It does.
Might do well to do 2 or 3.
Now, this is a good point as well in relation to what I was just saying. That, at the end of the day, there's, like, some people think that you can head down to the shore with your bucket and come back with a seafood chowder. But it's not that simple, and like, it's very scarce. Like you said about them, it takes a fair while to get a pot of wings, and then what's in them?
You couldn't go back then.
And you couldn't go back.
A year or two.
Yeah. And so it's not. So there isn't an awful lot of stuff there. And anything else on the seaweed or good man?
So I live in Ackle, so I got particular interest.
Don't worry, you have your health.
I'm actually 100 years of age, actually. We constantly refer to it as the potato famine, right? I know we're talking about seafood and all this, but out in Ackle we have our deserted village, the 80 homes that are vacated. Many of you would have visited that. We're talking about famine, which means starvation, which means people dying because they don't have food. Then we historically tell our story of it being a potato famine.
Yeah.
It seems to just dilute the broader picture of actually what went on. Yeah. Because potato meant that this thing that portrays worldwide the Irish and their potatoes and famine. That's been playing out for years. And no one has ever challenged that that 4 million people, I believe, went from 8 million to 4 post-famine, either died or emigrated.
It's an excellent point there, and something that I was actually going to mention there as well, like that. Yes, there was a lot of other food in the country, but a lot of it was being exported. And like before we go, I mean the British were responsible for the country and all that. But before we go totally laying on the British, there was lots of that time there was some farmers, bigger farmers, Irish. They were called. It was actually a technical term. They were called strong farmers, and they owned a lot. They would have a lot of. They were exporting a lot of stuff that should have been going to, as well, you know. But so was the big landlord. So yes, it was. So the bottom line was, as I saw it put somewhere, it wasn't the supply of the food; it was the access to the food. Like people, even without the famine, people had absolutely no disposable income. So they weren't going to, they couldn't buy anything, and so they didn't have the access. And again, that's the whole story in itself. Why they didn't have access, like they because no money and because of the system and because the richer people were exporting the food and so on. And of course, at the time too, there was talking about, I was saying about the perfect storm, even the weather that came against everything. There was the political doctor at the time was called laissez-faire. And that was meant that you leave the market forces to itself. I'm sure Donald Trump would have liked it, but he'd probably put levies on it. But anyway, but what do you call it? So like leave everything alone. The laissez-faire was the doctrine of the time, and it suited great because it meant no, we won't interfere. Just see how it pans out, you know. So
just one final point. I think we were misled. If I look back at my history books when I came up to school, we just got this idea that we had a plate of blight and half our country population. You know, it was taught as simple as that.
That's exactly, yeah. Now, and there's another element to that too. We'll come on to after another while about disease like them as well. Like, and so yes, it was more complex than just. I mean, the thing about it, the potato was a perfect food, and so like. You know, it meant we didn't really have to go thinking about too much else or doing it. It was perfect for the Irish situation. It had plenty of carbohydrates as well and everything, and it was that. So like we were over dependent on it. That was the problem. And in fact, you know, so people would even have lost a lot of knowledge and all that about the foreshore and seaweeds and that they could eat and all that. But you're right there. It's not. We do call it, and that was the big factor because we had become dependent on it. But it was broader than that, and access is a big part of it.
And then there was no education really. You know, there was hedge schools when the.
That's right, yeah. Well, like I said in that reading from Arson and Nicholson about the children going along and having to have a penny every day if they wanted to go to school, like, you know. Yeah, absolutely. And there was no system of education. But okay, so if you're happy enough with that, we'll move on then to the land. So surely to God, if the sea couldn't save us, surely the land has saved us. But we've actually started into that now. We're talking about the potato and how it was such a perfect food and we've become so dependent on it. And I could always, like, with the Irish mentality, you know the way people say, older people hear them say, it's too good, it won't last. You know, and I'm sure there was many the one where the potato was going great and everything was good. And I'm sure there was the odd fellow would lean on it. By the way, another thing, a spade, we always call a spade a lie. Even when we spoke, like we call it a lie. It's the Irish for a spade. We always, speaking Irish or English, we always refer to it as a lie. That's just another, I know that isn't familiar with it. But I could imagine there some man leaning on the lie, as they say sometimes, breastfeeding the lie, and turning to the other fellow and saying, your man saying, oh Jesus, they're great praties this year, great praties. And him saying, it's just too good, they won't last, it can't last. Something you'll have to give, you know, because of the negative way. But it did give, and the blight went along. But we were so, and in fairness, it was a perfect food, but too perfect in a way. So, getting into like, there are challenges on the land. Well, I was thinking, like in the back end of the year there, autumn time, although I know it's getting a bit earlier now, I'd go blackberry picking. And when I go off with my fancy Tupperware tub, picking blackberries, quality plastic, I have the hedgerows to myself. But I just think to myself, like, if you're back in famine times, and just imagine, if everybody came to the hedge, and you had as many hands and arms as there, and you know the briar is a very prolific plant, And if you had as many arms and hands as the briars themselves, reaching for them, they wouldn't last long. And there was reports I saw there, in a report from County Wicklow of where there was a fight and one or two people were killed fighting over blackberries in the famine times. But I'm just referring to my own experience with blackberries. Now, but imagine if everybody came with their kishon, that's a basket, with their kishon, which was the Tupperware of the time, and they were looking to gather the blackberries. As I said, they wouldn't last very long. And the same, you can apply the same thing to all other fruits. Nettles were good, were nutritious. And there was, I saw, and a thing in I read, and it could apply anywhere, but it just happened to be just Dungarvan where I saw, there is not a nettle to be found within 10 miles of Dungarvan. All the travelling people, like the people that were going hungry and homeless and all the travelling people have picked them all. And so there was quite a few lots of plants, like the nettles, all the different berries, elderberries, sorrel, burdock, lots of different plants that they could eat. Pig nut was a fairly nutritious. I don't know if any of you ever tried it, tasted it. It tastes okay. Not just kind of, you stick it up on the root. But then again, it's a good example. I mean, no more than you were saying about the winkles. You'd be a long time trying to get a feed of it, even though individually they are nutritious. And that was the thing. Hedgerows were picked bare and feed anything that could be eaten. And there was some people, because the potato also had also lost the knowledge about it. And here's another thing now that and I say maybe some of you mightn't even thought of it before, but it's only more recent times I thought about it myself. Another reason why they'd lost the knowledge about the plants and the hedgerows and all that was because we were, as you might say, like Ijar God Shanga. We were between two languages. We were, we were losing. The English had been bet into us, and we were losing the Irish. And all the knowledge was in there. All the knowledge was in Irish, and the names of plants and everything. Like I'm saying about the seaweeds, even up until recent times. But so it's amazing how much knowledge was lost in the transition from one language to another. Would you think that would be a factor?
Yeah.
But that was it. Then of course there was the access thing as well too. If you were trespassing if you were in gathering wild food, and indeed one of the things, just as an aside, about that whole thing with the knowledge of wild food and the use of wild food, that why it was lost even more after the famine, because there was such a memory and a sadness and a disgrace about being seen in going along hedges picking stuff like that nobody did it. It was, they just couldn't. You wouldn't want to be seen doing that after, because people had the images of from the famine of people, maybe leaving leaves and their lips green or whatever like that, and just crawling along trying to get whatever they could, and so people couldn't just live with that image, and so you wouldn't be seen there, and it's contributed also to, after the famine, to a big loss of knowledge about all that. But basically, again, it's same as I said with the show. Mother Nature did provide, but not for the masses, and there would be inconsistency in the quality as well too. Lack of knowledge, again, lack of access. All these would have come together, But again, a lot of the thing is down to if only a few people needed, that was fine. But there wasn't enough to feed the multitudes, there either. And it's the same. Talking about cultivated crops. Someone was saying to me one time, they said about turnips grew so easy in the west of Ireland and all that. And we used to feed them grow them for cattle and everything, But the thing about it, why didn't they? I think it was like a Facebook history page or something. And someone said, why didn't they change over to growing turnips and all that? And that was a more recent. But again, that was down to the nutritional thing. As my father would have said, turnips are only wind and water. And so there's definitely no carbs. Like, there's very little nutrition in it. I like turnips myself, but I mean there's very little nutrition around the end of them, you know. And definitely nothing for, you wouldn't go breaking stones on a feed of turnips, you know. But and people actually talking about turnips. People would even transport it Van Diemen's Land for which was another thing like you were talking about for stealing a turnip, or also for poaching things like rabbits and all that. So there could be severe enough penalties for doing something like that. So you were. You were saying about the more than the potato, you know, the fact like and all. But that also reminded me and implied a lot of and here's a man will know about this now, about the fact that would I actually, before I say it, would anyone hazard a guess how many people actually would you think died, of the percentage of people that died of illness and fever and during the famine? Well,
Half them maybe. Maybe half them.
Not maybe quite half, but definitely a third of them, like maybe 35%. And the most, of course, you see, it wasn't that simple. Like it just that well, you could say it was part of the perfect storm, because there was an awful lot of typhus in particular around. And typhus, depending on the situation around the people, you know, with nutrition and housing, because it was affected very much by nutrition and housing. There was a mortality rate from typhus, anything from 10 to 40%. So, like, that was the main killer. And it was very much associated with bad housing, poor food, poverty, overcrowding, several people having to share a bed, stuff like that, if they had a bed, or share the tick of straw, whatever they had.
2,000 people died in Westport Workhouse in 2 years. So they give you an idea, and that's, you know, that's supposed.
And they didn't die of starvation at that stage, or most of them, anyways.
Disease, or
well, it's interesting, Liam, you say that the workhouses were they naturally they were, for want of a better word, they were hot houses. They were incubators. That's the word I'm looking at. They were incubators of disease and typhus, and yes, and indeed that we got a bad name abroad for that, like that. Even when the people immigration and all that, they blamed the Irish North for bringing typhus to places. True or false, it was around anyways. But thankfully, it's a thing of the past now. But it was not a
Is there any indication as to how many people died of poisoning? I mean, if you were looking to eat something, I mean, you pick up fungus and whatever, and
well, it's interesting. Definitely, I've read that even with seaweed and shellfish and stuff like that. Did you hear what the man said? That many people would be poisoning themselves. And we all do it now. But anyways, what do you call whatever about killing them. But there was from stuff like that an awful lot of dysentery and stomach trouble. And of course, the thing about it was when you were already dehydrated and malnourished and everything, it didn't take much to keel you over. Yeah. So, like, yes, even if it wasn't to just poison them directly, it actually hastened their demise by actually, and it wasn't in a sense poison, but they wouldn't have died in normal circumstances, some of them from it. But it was just too much. If you had dysentery and, you know, so very bad diarrhea and everything like that, and dehydrated, and you were already malnourished, there wasn't much hope for you. You know, so yeah, it did happen.
Gerard Morden, there was a talking on the Castlebar workhouse this week, and he said the reason typhus is very common because they were put into a uniform when they came in where they weren't cleaned or washed, so the bugs in the uniform were spreading the typhus.
Well, that's very interesting because I didn't mention that, but hygiene is a huge part of typhus. Yeah, that's an interesting one, right? Yeah. That would, I could well imagine that.
And he said 25% of it. Who was that? You were it. James said it. What he
It's
said?
on video there, you can have a look at it.
What he said? 25% of the people who died during the famine died in workhouses.
Yeah, that's true. That is true, and that proves the point I'm making. That they actually the odd one did because they went in too late, but they would have been getting some little bit. They were by no means getting big feeds or anything, but they were getting. But they wouldn't have died after they went into the famine unless they were at death's door when they went in. They wouldn't have died of diabetes. So yes, the people in the famine. So that's actually a big question and a story in itself. That the number of people that the workhouses killed, they were all. It was a recipe for disaster. Sure, I'm crowding them all into one place, and typhus rampant.
The title of his talk was "The Slaughter Workhouse."
Huh?
The Slaughter Workhouse.
The slaughter workhouse. Yeah. Oh, actually, just now that you mentioned that, typhus actually was referred to as the famine disease. It was so related to the famine. They referred to it as the famine disease. Typhus was. Young man.
If potatoes were imported from Peru at a certain time, I can't remember when, and we were dependent on them when they came to Ireland eventually, what did the Ireland as like an island survive off of before the potatoes? Because would that not have been just a constant state of famine without?
What do you call it? Of course, wasn't it Walter Raleigh that brought the potatoes to the British Isles? Well, see, and that is a good, because we became like our land isn't very fertile, and that's why the potato was so suited and it grew so well in Ireland that the things that we were living on, which would have been cereals and corns and everything, and if we had kept that diversity, we would have been much better off. But the potato, I keep coming back to the potato was just such the perfect food for Ireland. But no, we would before the famine they'd have lived on wild plants, and they would have lived on corn and various cereals. To give it the broad term, cereals. I'm not talking about cornflakes now. But they would have lived on stuff. Amen.
The population was much smaller.
That's another thing.
There was a big expansion, and the craziness that went on with the way the land was divided and subdivided.
It
was a disastrous policy.
That is an excellent point. And the potato was responsible for a lot of the increase in the population. And then they kept do you know that the land kept being subdivided among the children? That's why after the famine, it was the tradition came in where the land was left to the eldest son. Now, I'm the eldest son, I didn't get the place. But anyway, the tradition where it was left to the eldest son, right? And what do you call? That was the reason, because they realised this can't go on, you know. And even the landlords, they were in rules as well, and that, like, you know. But it was being subdivided down until they had so little, like, you know. And that was a big problem, as Eamon says there.
The other area now, separate to that, all right, was the culture. We lost a lot of the culture, or music, because a lot of the musicians at the time, it was an oral tradition, so they would travel around the country to fairs and weddings and all kinds of things, and local musicians would try and get there, because there was no recordings, so you tried to learn off the tune from the travellers. But and it was considered an honour in the old culture, like, to, you know, keep a musician in your house.
That's right, yeah.
And feed them and look after them while when the famine came, then quite a few of them, a lot of them died. And somebody mentioned that had visited Ireland just before the famine, or shortly before that the sound of music and singing in all the fields, because it was a very ruralised population. Most people lived in the rural areas. And of course the house dances,
that's right,
all of that type of thing. There was a Canon James Goodman, he was down in Kerry. He was Protestant, you know, but he loved the music, and he had learned Irish. He played the uilleann pipes, which was an Irish instrument, and he was transferred over to London, and sometime later down, or it was only back in the 1980s, I think, it descended to his found a book in the attic, and it was written in the old Gaelic, but he thought that it was Arabic, And he gave it to somebody. He said, "Oh, cheers," he said, that's Irish. But he had tunes written down, 2,000 tunes written down from that time. Vast majority of which have disappeared. I was at a concert actually there once with Mick O'Brien and his daughter, and it was fascinating. Even Fána Galan Lay. Now he was writing them down as he heard them, so there would be a difference there. But it was there was another Captain O'Neill as well too, with the Irish that went over to America, and they brought the tunes with them, of course. So he became captain in Chicago. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And if you were able to play an instrument,
You got a
it's
job.
far more important than being able to work out as a good guy.
Because the ordinary person in the street, they had no money for instruments, you know. So, and
They
that's
sold
why,
the instruments.
like, sorry,
They had to sell the instrument.
they had to sell the instruments if they were lucky enough to have them.
Going from next to nothing.
And as Liam knows, and you know, like that back then, even going in my parents' time, they tell me about when they would have the house dances for the dance halls, like they would actually dance to what was. There's different names, and there's some call it lilting and some call it gob music. You know, can you give us a flash to plug gob music there? No, but you know what I mean by gob music, like I can't say that, you know, and so they would, and there was actually a travelling woman was used to go around back then, even in my father's young days, and I'm talking about the early around the 1920s, 30s, that and called Biddy Kippen. And she used to that's how she get her board and lodging. She would play for house dances, gob music, or lilt or whatever you want to call it. And gob is the Irish for mouth, by the way. Yes. And but another kind of a colloquial like bail is the but gob is kind
And
of a slang
the
term.
cleaners then, hadn't the cleaners? They had cleaners then.
The cleaners as well, for the wigs.
Yeah.
But interestingly, they blamed, just to remind me of the time of wigs, they blamed the wigs a lot with the typhus as well, that it was called the spreading the typhus. And people would be given clay pipes at wigs, you know, to smoke. And it was, now I put it down to a kind of, but even in the field behind our house, I remember when we were reclaiming the land, we'd find in loads of clay pipes, and they'd be always broken. But the thing was, now I thought it was kind of like a superstition, but they break the pipe. But on reflection in later years, I think actually the reason they broke it was because between typhus and TB and everything, they didn't want anyone else to smoke, to use it, you know, because of spreading disease. But I suppose like a lot of kind of semi-religious things, like if you think of a lot of things that would be in the Bible in the ancient times, they were actually health education in another form, like, you know, how it was a sin not to wash your hands and all this before you know. It was kind of health education done through religion, because people were afraid of going to hell and stuff. But anyways, but it was like with the pipe, it was probably go down to some religious thing, but it was actually stop the spread of disease. And I'd say part of the reason that the people, the big houses stopped taking in musicians and that as well to travel and minstrels was because everybody was so afraid of getting that typhus was spread by these travelling people who, you know, mightn't have access to showers or anything.
As Liam was sharing there about before the famine, the music and singing of the Irish people, Robert Service now, as far as I remember, he was walking through France before the First World War. And I think the women and all the people out walking in the fields, singing and music as well during their work.
That's right, yeah.
And I just thought of it as Liam was mentioning there about our poor ancestors before the famine, and something beautiful about it to hear such things. Even you think little birds singing so naturally. Already the thrush has started, and the blackbird has started, and the thing with it, I don't want to overtalk, but there you're mentioning about the landlords, and my father now was great fisherman, great huntsman with the gun. I hate to shoot pheasants, honestly myself, I couldn't bear it. But the thing with it, when he was growing up, the Mayo was the local man minding the river and that, and the river shore was full of salmon, trout, eel. The fields were full of when I was a youngster growing up, the rabbits were as plentiful. Looking down, I remember one field, the field under Gorman's Hill, we used to call it. They were so plentiful, you think the whole field was moving into the ditch of hedgerow. And the way with it, as well as you mentioned about the ditches or hedgerows, when Patsy, my brother, died now last August, but he'd done one wonderful thing to preserve the hedgerows that were in the farm in his father's time, his grandfather's time, and back through the generations. And I was walking down and visiting, I used to go down visiting Patsy and help him, he was invalid. But I walked up to the field they called the 5 acre field last year, and the hedgerow, the beauty of it was out of this world. I took my time and watched it, the beauty, nothing to surpass it. And I walked as well in Galway by the River Corrib, and people talk about tidy towns and tidy this and tidy that, and planting flowers. The valerian flower in the month of May was ornamenting the Corrib River. 'Twas, I'd have to use the word heavenly. The beauty was so outstanding in the ornamentation of the Corrib River. So that is a few things. Oh yeah, the Choctaw Indians, they were on last night nationwide, and they were wonderful, the poor things, poor old Indian people, and helped the time of the famine. And there was another Indian tribe as well helped. I can't remember their name, but
that's right. Of course, as Richard is saying there, as Richard is saying there, what was it going to remind me? I lost the track. It reminded me of something there. What remind me? There are so many things you could say. You could come here for a year and have a different theme every time about the famine, so that's why I narrowed it. That's why I said, okay, I didn't want something too depressed, so I said I'll narrow it down. And it's a thing that people like. It's lovely to see lots of young people here as well, and people that aren't due to. And these are the questions they'd ask. It's like I think. Like as Marie Antoinette in France, when she said about when the people said there's no bread, and she says, well, let them eat cake. So I'm sure the British people were saying that when they said there's no potatoes, they probably would say, well, sure, let them eat fish, But so it's not that simple. Like Seamus, let them eat bread, as with Marie Antoinette.
Seamus, sorry.
How were we?
Seamus, what about wildfowl and like somebody mentioned earlier there about rabbits and hares and animals like that? Surely they were plentiful at the time.
That's a very good point, Malcolm. But the thing is that that's the control and access. That was one thing that the landlords took, and they had their bailiffs and all that. Who was mentioned about the fishing bailiffs and all that? And they were. That's one thing they were eagle-eyed about, was people they considered poaching, even though they were just wild animals. But that's because they wanted a lot of them, especially the birds. They wanted them for their rich gentry friends for coming on their shoots or whatever. And but you could be sent to Van Diemen's Land for snaring a rabbit or something, weirdly enough. So like the more than rich thing, even I'm sure it's the same then. There was so much rabbits and all that, but even the food that you could buy, like I said, access because there was no money. And so, whatever way you look at it, like the control of the landlord, the lack of money, the transport, a lot of it boils down to one word: access. And that was like with absolutely. No, it isn't to say that lots of people wouldn't have poached rabbits. And indeed, there was cases of where people ate the household dog, even and cats or whatever like that. They were so desperate.
I think there was
the dogs. Trump eating the dogs in Trump.
Oh yeah.
I think there was a bailiff in Westport House into the 1960s.
Is there a bailiff?
There was.
Oh yeah.
With a gun.
With a gun, exactly.
With a gun, that's right. Yeah.
And indeed, even in much later years, I remember there was a song in this area about a bailiff that shot. He was working for the land, and he shot a man. I remember my mother used to quote some lines out of it.
He was a relation of my own, John McNamara.
Well, that's understandable. So.
He was poaching. He was poaching.
Now we know when he shot him.
He was shot in the river in Louisburgh.
Yeah, that's right, he was McNamara. We talked about that song before. I'd love to get the full words of it, but because there's a line in it about was McNamara the man that shot him?
He got shot.
Oh yeah, Care. That's right, because there's a line of the song said, and Care, the dirty devil, went home and went to bed.
That's right. That's 3 days later when John died.
But but the point is saying, and it's just that was a bit later, but back even then, it was they were bailiffs. They would have been armed, and they took that awful serious, about poaching and that. Like even when things were at their deadliest. Now I've gone on, I think, for over an hour, and
no, in 10 minutes.
You're thirsty.
And counting.
Go on, keep going.
That's the thing with the videos now, they know exactly how long they are. But so we'll throw it out there again, and